So the conversation this morning was about putting patients first and putting patients in the center of everything that we do. And there was a lot of discussion and many contributions from participants in the Congress talking about the need to collaborate, the need to share best practices, the need to engage in full discussion between governments, payers, clinicians, industry, and crucially patients who've often been left out of the discussion. And I talked specifically about the need for our industry and the healthcare industry in Europe to become kind of obsessed with biomarkers and obsessed with the development of a full range of biomarkers to ensure that the right patient gets to the right drug at the right time. And that was the principal message that I wanted to get across today. So I have a strong belief that finding the patients that can benefit from your drug is kind of an important component of developing a drug. Just merely producing a new treatment and studying it in an all-comer population can be and may be appropriate. Certainly historically that's the approach we've taken. Increasingly, I think finding those patients that can derive the most benefit from an intervention is clearly beneficial to that patient because they get access to the best treatment for them as rapidly as possible. But it goes further than that. If you're taking a patient-centric approach to healthcare, you want to find the patients that don't benefit. So if you can find those patients who really should be getting the existing treatment and not the new treatment, much better for them that they get that existing treatment straight away without unnecessarily cycling through a new innovation that just happens to not be right for them. So I think this idea of precision in the drugs that we provide to patients and who benefits, I think is a way that we can make the whole healthcare system more efficient for patients for sure, but also for payers, for governments, for those bodies that have to fund the healthcare system. So I talked about biomarkers for protein expression in the area of immuno-oncology, so PD-L1 expression, and using the levels of PD-L1 expression to highlight specific patient populations where we see deeper, longer-lasting responses and more responses than elsewhere. And having been involved in some of the early work around these drugs from a sort of trial design and understanding perspective, I feel very strongly that fully characterizing the monotherapy activity of a new treatment and the use of appropriate biomarkers is very important. I also touched on RAS testing in Europe today, and I commented on the huge variability that we see between levels of RAS testing across countries, the reimbursement of tests within different healthcare systems, and the speed that it takes the various systems in each market to turn around those tests and actually get the results back to the treating clinician so that they can initiate treatment. And we see huge variability across very well developed markets, and that's not right for patients, and we should be getting obsessed with turnaround time and getting the answers back to the clinicians very quickly. I think it's a combination of things. So certainly the infrastructure has to be there, so the labs have to be there, the understanding around biomarkers and what it's appropriate to test and what needs to be tested before best treatment can be initiated. Having the regulatory framework in place that provides the right reimbursement for biomarkers so that there are no impediments in the way of it happening. And I think awareness generally needs to pick up. I saw I think ECPC study which said that something like 30% of all cancer patients are unaware that things called biomarkers even exist, and that in 60% of consultations where it's appropriate for a biomarker discussion to take place with the patient, it's still not happening. So I think we have a long way to go in Europe to get levels of understanding right and levels of infrastructure right to get to the optimal treatment as rapidly as possible. The key element that I finished on was the need to collaborate and cooperate across the various stakeholders. I think industry has an important part to play in this, but what's particularly exciting to me is that this event here this week is geared towards getting the right patient input into the R&D process, and that's something that Merck is very committed to doing and very committed to ensuring. Our Group CEO has the presidency of the FPA organization for this upcoming period, and I know it's high on his agenda to ensure that patient input into the clinical programs and the R&D programs are taken forward as fully as possible to ensure we're developing drugs that are accurate but that are as good as they can be for the patients that need to take them.